Hi, this is Linda Crowder at Russell Specialty Books and Gifts, and this is another of our virtual author events since we can't all get in person yet. This is Julie Seedorf. And Julie, why don't you introduce yourself?
My name is Julie Seedorf. I write cozy mysteries. I write children's books. I am a former columnist, and I am also a blogger, and I am from the wonderful state of Minnesota.
Yay!
Yay! Long a ways from Kansas with maybe a few more trees. I don't know. It's been a long time since I've been in Kansas.
We have a few trees, but we're not forested, you know.
Yeah. Well, and I live in southern Minnesota, so we're mostly farming country.
Oh, well, we're farm country here too.
Yeah, and of course lakes. We have lakes every place in Minnesota. So
we have Lake Wilson, which is touted to be the clearest lake in the United States. So
wow.
One of these days when it opens again, I want to get my boat out on it.
That sounds awesome.
Yeah.
Clear water.
Clear water. Maybe you can see the fish avoiding your hook. I don't know.
Yes.
So have you always been a writer, Julie, or did you have a life before writing?
Well, I've always been a writer for fun. When I was a teenager, when I was in 11th grade, I discovered creative writing. I've always been a journaler, diary back then. And I also wrote a lot of poetry, especially after I got out of high school. And then I didn't really forget about writing, but at that time, if you would have said you wanted to be a writer and an author, it just wasn't done. And so, I got married, had kids, worked, had my own businesses, and then kind of actually during I had an illness and I was so depressed, and I started writing on a blog, and that's how my first book came about, because I was just being silly. But every morning I woke up with a new chapter in my head, and I wrote about it on my blog. And then on a whim, I saw Cozy Cat Press. I had read a book, and I thought, well, this kind of sounds like my book. Why I ever sent it in, I have no idea. I mean, it was just a whim. And Patricia came back and said, we need 20,000 more words. And if you do this and this and this, maybe we'll offer you a contract. And this was back in the early days of Cozy Cat Press. This was 2012. And so I did. And here I am.
And the rest is history.
I guess, I really credit my Grandma Young with this from up above, because if you take a look at the granny on my books, now I gave no one any instructions. My publishing company took care of that, and the first book came out, and I loved the granny on the cover, but there was something just really bothering me. And I had some t-shirts, and I have cups and things made. And one day I was going to a speaking engagement, and I started thinking about my Grandma Young, who died when I was 6 years old. And I thought, why am I thinking about my grandma? It wasn't something I usually thought about. And then I realized that the granny on my book was an identical drawing of my real grandma.
Wow.
So I went home. My cousin from California was here, and I went home and I dug out my pictures of my grandma. And there was a picture of my grandma with the same hat, same dress.
No way.
Same nose, same glasses, same hairstyle. In fact, somewhere on my blog, I have a side-by-side picture of the granny in the book and my real grandma.
Oh my gosh.
The way things happened with my writing career, I have to think. And then all of a sudden, thoughts of my grandma came to mind, and this happened. And I'm a real believer in listening to intuition and signs from above. And I believe it was my grandma. And now I think of her a lot.
Does the book also have your grandma's personality? Because that would be a wild ride.
No, she has more my mother's personality.
Oh my.
My grandma that I remember, of course, when I was 6 years old, she was 80 years old because my dad was the youngest child. And my parents didn't have me till they were 42. So my grandma was old when I was young. But I remember, I do remember her. I remember her always letting me sit on the bed and comb her long black hair. She didn't color her hair. She still had black hair at
Wow.
80. And I remember a talcum powder she used. And she was just a kind, gentle, sweet lady. And the granny in my book is totally
Not
ornery and
kind,
different.
gentle, sweet. No, I tell people
No.
when they tell you, take this book, this is not like any granny you've probably ever known. And there's the granny.
Although I will say, my mother was still on top of her roof at 90 years old, fixing her roof.
Oh my
And
gosh.
she was kind of ornery and cantankerous. And if you told her she couldn't do something, she would do it. And so
That was my grandma. My grandma was carrying shingles up to my mom and I when we were fixing the roof.
Yep.
And when she was 90, and I was very impressed by that because that was a really tall roof.
Yeah. And then, my mother got dementia
Oh,
when she was she had to go into a nursing home when she was 91, and that was not a good situation, but she adapted well to the nursing home. And in the first Granny book, Granny has real memory problems, but it's kind of a ruse to to trick her kids. And I had someone write to me, and they were very upset by the way I portrayed her memory, because if I had ever had anyone with Alzheimer's or dementia, I would not be doing that. Well, I had my mother, I had my mother-in-law, I had my brother-in-law, I had my sister-in-law. All of them had dementia or Alzheimer's. And the only way we got through it was with humor.
yeah. But not everybody takes everything. I think that's one of the cardinal rules of being an author is you're not going to make everybody happy. Some
No,
people will hate what you do, and some people will love it.
exactly. You either love or hate Granny, and you love or hate
That
the
is
books.
true. I bet you do, because she has a very strong personality.
Well, and not only that, the books are really silly. I mean, who has grass growing in the places that she has, especially the first book. But they're meant to make people laugh, and they're meant to take you away from the real world, which is both my Brilliant series and my Fushcia series are not meant to be literal. They're kind of a play on. I hate the fact that every house looks the same, and I call it the graying of America.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of a play on what the society we live in today, and how we actually think of old people too. And so it's not meant, it's meant to make you see things a little differently and take you away from our structured world, because I tried to live in that structured world for a long time and adapt. And I am not a structured person, and I was miserable.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I liked about Fuchsia was the tunnels under the city, because we here in Kansas, some of our towns, including Russell, they're not in use anymore, but some of our towns do have tunnels under the town. So, and I think that unless you're from the Midwest, I think that's very foreign to a lot of people, but I saw a lot of Kansas in that part.
Well, and yeah, and if I don't know if there's an author out east, and a reviewer, and she told me a story about my book reminded her of what happened to her. Her husband's a realtor, and he had this house that someone had lived in to put up for sale, but nobody had ever went into this room in the basement. The door was blocked paneling, and she wanted him, to go and see what it was. And he goes, I'm not going in there. Yeah. And no one would go in that. No one would tear down the wall until, not even the building inspector, until I forget who came to inspect the house, and they tore down the wall. And here they found a secret room. And in this room was old hats and old whiskey bottles. And it
Oh my
had been
gosh.
distillery. And actually there was a lift and a tunnel, kind of a tunnel, to the garage where they snuck the whiskey out. And here's and that's when it was illegal. And across the street, you know, she did the research. Then across the street, the sheriff or the deputy, somebody lived at the time this gangster was doing that, and they figure, you know, he was probably bought off and he knew all this was going on. So there are a lot of interesting things about tunnels and caves, and I have no idea why that interests me. In my new book, I have hidden secrets in the house, hidden staircases and things, and I've always wanted to live in a house with a hidden staircase and things like that.
Well, have you ever been to the Winchester Mystery House in San Jose, California? There are hidden staircases, and there are staircases to nowhere. There's a lot of. Granny would build a house like that, I think. Granny would.
If I were not married to my conservative, wonderful husband, I would have a house like that. My house that I have would be rebuilt with those, and I don't know why. I don't know why. That just fascinates me.
But they're fun.
Yeah, exactly.
So I do have the Granny books, again, in the store, but you have other books that I don't necessarily carry, but let's talk about them.
Okay, I have the Brilliant Minnesota Series book. I could just run and get it. Those are puzzle books. The first one is the Pendergast Puzzle Protectors. And the main character is Jezebel. And that one has a mystery that revolves around a puzzle. And it takes place in a Victorian neighborhood. And these people have lived there a long time, but all of a sudden things are popping up. They're finding secret things in their houses. And they found out the Brilliant brothers built Brilliant, Minnesota. And then after they had built this community and these houses, they mysteriously disappeared, and it became kind of a ghost town for a while till it became inhabited. And so the characters have to put the pieces together to solve the murder mystery.
Of where the Brilliant brothers went?
That the Brilliant brothers left.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Nice.
And then the second one is Discombobulated Deciphers. Now, the reason it's named that is because the Pendergast Puzzle Protectors had to disband because Hank Hardy, the police chief, told Jezebel they could not get into trouble anymore in that town. And so the Pendergast Puzzle Protectors had to disband. So this takes place at Christmas. So she formed the Discombobulated Deciphers after the elf was found frozen and dead in the community square during a blizzard. And it all revolves around Christmas and the church and the community square. And so there's 2 books in that series.
And there's 6 in Granny?
There's 6 in Granny. There will be 1 more book in the Granny series, and then I think that will be it. I'm not sure about the Puzzle Protectors. And then I have, this is my latest book. Came out in December. And I did some unique things in this one. This is, I'll read the back of it because it's easier.
Can you read us the title? Because all you can really see is murder because it's kind of dark.
A small town can be #murder.
Oh, cool.
And you have all heard the story. Big city girl moves to small town and lives happily ever after. Well, that's not the forever after Angel DeLate found when she moved to Whistle Stop, Minnesota. And first, her realtor is found dead in her new house, which also is rumored to be haunted. Then homeless animals show up at her doorstep along with a bevy of townspeople who seem to know what she is doing at all times. To top it off, a secret journal was found during renovation, indicating that, I can't see because I'm not, indicating more secrets hidden in the small community. And it's about a gal. It comes from Chicago. Her dad owned a construction company, and her dad sold the construction company, but she was a carpenter. And she was a construction manager for her dad's company. And she decided that now dad was selling the construction company instead of staying with the new people. She was going to start a new life. She happened to drive, she was on her way to somewhere else, and she happened to drive through Whistle Stop, Minnesota, fell in love with this house, and decided to buy it and relocate here. And the first day after she buys it, her realtor is found dead. Well, she's not used to a small town. And in small towns, you know, everybody knows what you're doing. That can be good or bad. And so she learns a lot about small towns as she's renovating the house. She finds a secret journal of a young girl that lived in the house that was pregnant back in the 50s. And they kept her in the carriage house because back in those days, you know, people were ashamed. And so it all revolves around there. They solve the murder. There's a little bit about, I took, you know, cozy mysteries don't usually cover teenage pregnancies in the 50s or spousal abuse. And there's a little bit of that in there too. It's a good mystery. The reviews have been really good. Has not as quirky. It's more down to earth. There's a little romance in there, and we have a few characters like Barney Pipe, Pipe, not to be confused with Barney Fife. But some of the things I did with this book is I live in a small town. I've lived in a small town all my life, and I wanted to pay a little reverence to the small town, not the murder. We don't do that here. But so on the cover, I used a local photographer. His photography is beautiful, and you can find some of his pictures on my website. They can be bought. And so I used a picture of him that he took. On the cover was our depot, which is now a museum, and it was in the fog. And then on the back is a picture of our main street when we have our car show, our antique car show last summer. And a lot of the references in the books are references to old things, you know, businesses that used to be here when I was growing up. So I named some of my businesses not exactly like them, but kind of like them, you know, meaning the White House Eatery used to be the White House Cafe. And so that's what I'm going to do with this series. And I'll always use Dave's photos for the cover and things like that. And that one is produced by published by Skybridge Publishing.
Awesome. Awesome. So a lot of people, you're tossing out the term cozy mystery. A lot of people, when I say, well, this one is a cozy and this one is a more of a suspense, you know, they're really not as up on what exactly that means. Because Granny, I would classify as what I call a comic cozy, which is, it's a mystery, but it's funny. It's mostly funny with some mystery thrown in. And then this Murder in a Small Town Can Be Murder sounds more like what I would call a classic cozy, which is more in the lines, it's more serious, it's a little bit more suspenseful, more in the lines of like an Agatha Christie.
It is, yes.
Is that accurate, do you think?
I think it is accurate. You know, I have to tell you, I wrote a cozy and I didn't even know I wrote a cozy. When I wrote that first book, I had never heard of cozy mysteries. And when they told me it was a cozy, I had to look it up, and yes, that falls in there perfectly. You know, and it just depends on your publishers, because I have one friend that's with a different publisher, and guns are not allowed. You know, there are things that are not allowed. You don't shoot people and things like that. And that's why when we did one of our group mysteries for Cozy Cat Press, the last one we did, there was a huge shootout, and it's like, and then it was my chapter, and I'm like, no, that's a big no. So
shootout.
So I kind of changed it a little bit, you know, because some people get upset about that.
Now, see, my books are Alaska and Wyoming, and both of those communities, if people didn't have guns, I wouldn't be true to the community.
Well, and I have guns in mine too. I don't ever shoot anyone, no. So, you know, I agree. because here too, it's the same things, but there are some things you just apparently don't do. Now for me, I don't like cozies. The line's getting slid sometimes more and more these days. I don't like cozies that have any bad language in, and cozies aren't supposed to have bad language.
Right.
Just because I never want to write anything that my grandkids can't read, although
For
they're
me,
getting
it was
older.
my mother my Aunt Ruth couldn't see very well in the last years of her life. She was in her 90s. And so my mother would read my books onto tape. This was before any of them were audiobooks. She would read them to my great aunt and send her the cassette tapes. And so I would always picture when I was writing, my mother is going to be reading this to my great aunt. So yeah,
and how
mine
can
are
I write
very
those?
G language as far as that goes.
And how can I write those things
and still be interesting?
And have my grandkids come back to me and say, well, we're not supposed to talk like that, so why are you writing that? And in fact, I had a step grandchild for a little while, and he loves my books. We're still in touch, but he said to me, why do you have to kill someone in your books?
Mm-hmm.
And I've really been internalizing that and trying to figure that out, but inevitably I still do,
Now there are authors who write cozy mysteries without the murder angle. I mean, the mystery is a robbery or a jewel theft or, some other mystery, but there's no murder in it. So I do designate myself as a murder mystery writer because there are mystery writers that don't have murder involved.
Right. I actually, though, haven't really read anybody that, I guess I haven't read a cozy that doesn't have a murder in it.
Deborah Garner. Read Deborah Garner. She doesn't have murders in hers.
Okay. So anyway, no, it's an interesting genre to be in. And I like writing them. I tend to read thriller books, though, just as much.
So who's your favorite author?
Oh, I would have to say I have a few. Catherine Coulter, J.T. Ellison, Claire Cook, Alan Eskins. I don't really have one favorite author. I love Sharon Rose Murphy's books. I can't tell you because I love almost, I love cozy mystery authors. I love the other authors. I don't think I have a favorite author. Right now I'm reading Brian Freeman. I just got done with the Kristen Hanna. Now I've got some cozy mysteries from some of my friends that I want to read. Diane Weiner writes great cozies.
She does. I love her books.
Yeah. So, it's just Mary Bakos. She's with Cozy Cat Press too, and I actually know her in person. I love her books. So
I know we're also virtual these days.
Yeah. Well, she lives not too far from me.
Oh, there you
Mary
go.
does.
Nobody lives close. Well, we do have authors in Kansas and in Russell, but yeah, none of the other cozy catters. Let's talk Cozy Cat for just a second. I have the Cozy Cat cookbook, Cozy Cat's Cook, and I have a recipe in here, moose burgers, which is in my Caribou King novel. Actually, it's a recipe my husband came up with, and we don't use moose because he hasn't gotten a moose, but you could use elk, deer.
I have that book I have it on my Kindle, and I've used some of those. I don't have a recipe in there. I don't like to cook, so
that's another hallmark of cozies, is there's a subgenre of cozy that is the cookbook cozy. Many cozies have recipes at the end. So I think that's probably what inspired this.
And my discombobulator decipherers, actually, I used a recipe by a 100-year-old friend of mine. Her name was Violet Johansson. She died when she was 102. But I used some of her recipes in my book because cozies do have recipes, and they have some very good recipes.
Yeah, yeah, I've seen a couple of cozy authors have so many recipes over the course of their series that now they're putting out cookbooks.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. So, and you were in fact the author who inspired me to contact Cozy Cat with my Caribou King, because my Jake and Emma I published myself, but it's
It
a
is.
lot of work. And so for Caribou, I was really looking for a publisher, partly to just kind of take some of that load off. So I appreciate you putting me in mind with Cozy Cat. Tell me about this new other publisher you have for your other series.
Skybridge Publishing. That's Annie Sirik's publishing
Oh,
company.
okay.
And
Annie is my editor, by the way.
yes,
For those of you who are not into that, if you're an author and you need an editor, let me know, because Annie's wonderful.
The editing pen. Annie's awesome. I'm comma challenged, so she does my books, and I was really happy with her contract, and not only that, just everything she does with the editing, which it was all included in the contract. So I just decided to try, it's a different series, different direction. So that's why I chose to go with Annie this time in the editing pen. And she's done an excellent job. She does a lot for promotion, and she just took everything out of my, I wrote the book, and yes, we had a lot of editing. We went back and forth for probably 2 months before, but then she did it all, and it was wonderful. And you're right. My Brilliant series I published myself through Hermione Vidalia Books, and Annie, the editing pen, did edit those too. And I really enjoying it. But when you get so many books out there like you have and things like that, it's the social media promotion, trying to write another book, all of that gets really time consuming and can just wear you out.
Yeah, it does take away from the writing. So I always I get a lot of people who talk to me about, well, I want to write a book, and how do I get it done, and how do I get it published? And so we talk about deciding whether you should submit to a publisher or publish it yourself, because there are pros and cons to each decision. So it's a hard, if you're with a small press, you're going to do the promotion pretty much yourself, for most small presses too. And sometimes even when you're with a big press, you're doing a lot of the promotion yourself. You're on the road, you're doing all kinds of things. So there's a big decision that goes into it.
Well, there is, and there's so much more people just don't see. They think you write a book and that's it, and that's not it. Writing the book is easy. It's what comes. It's what comes afterwards. I don't have any trouble writing. It flows. It's what comes afterwards, and I think that's what kind of stops me sometimes from writing, because it's like, okay, when I get done with this, this is really hard. But and the audiobook process, people say it's so much work. I did not find it work. I found that the people that I chose to do my books were so professional. They did such a good job that I didn't hardly have to do anything but listen to it and publish it.
And God bless her. The narrator I have on my Caribou series is just fantastic. She's done a heck of a job. And I do find it a little bit hard, I have to say, to listen to it.
Yes.
Because, yeah. And maybe other authors will understand why I say that, but and she has such a take on it, because she picked up nuances to my characters that I had put there so that I could build on them in the future. And I didn't realize that she would pick up on them, but she really did. And it was an interesting collaboration. But yeah, audiobooks are not as hard as getting them going in the first place.
And I happen to think we should actually do it backwards. We should publish the audiobooks first, because you're right. Listening to someone else reading it and putting their take on it changes sometimes the way you think you do. Like, was it, I'm trying to think if it was Granny Bricks or Bandit. I had to do a new, yeah, it was Granny Bricks or Bandit. I had to do a new narrator because my other narrator got out of the business.
Aw.
Which really made me sad because the other one did so well, but this one does a great job. But all of a sudden, a couple of my characters have accents.
Oh.
And I was going to go back and say, no, don't do this. And then it was like, yeah, I really like that. I think I need to remember to carry that forward. And they should have all along because of their names, but none of us caught it. And then, I also think you hear the mistakes.
Oh, yes. She picks up typos that none of my editors or proofreaders or beta readers caught. And so then I have to go back and fix them and republish again. And for the print ones, I have to notify Cozy Cat so that they can make sure the physical book matches everything else. And I do get occasional emails from readers pointing out a typo or two. And if I haven't already fixed that in a later version than they have, I do go back and fix those, which is a nice thing about small press and indies is that we can fix those kinds of things. Whereas, if you're one of the big five and, you have to plan your print run so far in advance, there's no way you're going to fix something after it's already out.
And I think it's interesting you mentioned the ease of that. I did the Brilliant Minnesota series and published them myself, and then I went with Skybridge Publishing. And I am very happy there. But the thing I find myself frustrated with, and I have wonderful control. If I call and say, well, can we do this or can we do that or something like that, they'll go, sure, or maybe not. They control the price, they control all of that.
Right.
With my approval and things, we do all that. But I find myself at times when I'll be sitting here thinking, well, maybe I should reduce my book and have a sale today. I can't just go and do it, or I want to do something else. I just can't go and do it. And I think it's the relinquishing of control for me now that I did it on my own that sometimes is hard, but I'm very happy with the way it's done. It's just, I think I'm a control person when it comes to my own work. So I'm not sure a big publisher and I would get along.
No,
I have some friends.
I think so. And a big publisher would not be as patient as Cozy Cat is with me when I'm behind on my deadlines.
Well, and I have a friend, Alan Eskins, who is a New York Times bestseller, and he lives 30 miles from me, and he is on the road when he has a new book all over the United States, and I look at what these people are doing as far as promotion, where they're going, how many bookstores they're being at, and all of that, and it's like, whoa, that's not what I want for my life.
Yeah.
So even if I would ever take the chance of trying to get published with a big publisher, I don't think I'd like it because I don't want to be gone all the time. I like being home. So I have a question for you. Where do you think we're going with the book business now with all these things going on?
I am a member of the American Booksellers Association, which is indie booksellers all over the country. And I go to their, I don't go all the time, but they have twice weekly phone calls just to kind of, rally each other and support each other through this. And, it's a struggle, but fortunately I was able to stay open throughout because my county designated me a necessary service. So that was nice. My sales were not very strong while I was open, but I was open. And I really like offering the home delivery and the curbside pickup. And I think those are going to stay even afterward. But what keeps the indie stores alive where the big stores are shaky is that we know our books. We know a lot of times we know the author. I have a lot of indie authors in the bookstore, so I can really talk to people about, well, what kind of book do you like, and match them with a book that I think that they'll enjoy, and then they can come back and get more from that author. So being able to curate, being able to special order, being able to, when I opened, I didn't have a big history section, but everybody wants history and Kansas history. So now I have a fairly strong Kansas history section in the bookstore. So you listen to what people say, and you change your book offerings to match what people say. People are always asking for large print books, so I'm going to start having some large print. I'm doing a large print, those tiny free bookstores or tiny free libraries that you see around. I'm going to do one in the Pocket Park, which is right next to my store. I'm going to do one for large print only.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, and authors are donating large print versions of their books to just give people a sampling of authors that they can't find in the library, even when the library reopens someday, maybe. So I think that the indie booksellers are going strong. I think we will lose some of them after this, because the ones that had to shut down, I'm already seeing them putting their book libraries up for sale to other bookstores that are still in business. I'm seeing people really, really having a hard time paying the bills. And so I was fortunate when I opened. I had enough cash reserve to carry me for a year before I even opened the store. So that's been very, very helpful. But we're going to lose some stores, but I think we're going to come out of it much more strong. I think people understand now what we can do for them that they're not going to get from a Barnes & Noble, they're not going to get from an Amazon or anywhere else they're going to be. So I think we'll come out of it. I think it's always shaky. They always, like the Wall Street Journal called this the Armageddon of retail stores. And there are a lot of retail stores that are going under, but I don't think it's going to be indie bookstores.
Yeah, in Minnesota, our bookstores have been closed, but they could do curbside pickup, or if you call them. In fact, I have a book coming from my friend's bookstore in Austin, which is 30 miles away. And our governor has now said retail stores can reopen on Monday. And I asked her if she was going to reopen on Monday, and she said, no, not yet. She was still going to keep it safe because she didn't feel safe opening yet, because our numbers are going up. And so, and there's some bookstores up in the cities that have been doing that too, and curbside pickup. Our libraries, this is the interesting thing about our libraries, is they've only been closed. They're closed, but they were only closed to pick up for maybe 3 weeks, something like that. And I had a book by Claire Cook that I had been waiting for. And I just figured, well, this isn't going to happen. Well, last week, the library pickups were able to open up again. And the library called me and said, oh, we're sorry it took so long, but your book was in quarantine. So our libraries, the books go into quarantine before they get to us. And so I think
that's the plan for our library too. They're doing pickup now. And I think they're quarantining and then disinfecting. Books are tough. I didn't feel real comfortable until another one of our stores here in town, OPI Office Products, hooked me up with an in-store hand sanitizer, because you could not find hand sanitizer. I had this teeny little travel size bottle that I had at home, but they hooked me up with that, and people use that as they come into the store. And I think that makes things a little bit safer maybe than they were.
I think so. Can we talk about libraries for a minute?
Sure.
A lot of authors don't like libraries. I mean, the ones I know do, because they feel that it puts crick in their sales. I want to just tell everybody, my readers and everything, go to the libraries, keep the libraries open. I'm perfectly fine. I'd love you to buy my books, but I'd love you to go to the library too. And if a library doesn't have a book, or one of mine, or one of Linda's that you can't get, ask them to order it for you.
And they will do that.
Yep. Have it in. They will do that. I don't care where you are. They will absolutely do that. And I actually donate some of my books to libraries for people to read. That's one of the first things I do when I get new books in like that too. So I would really encourage my readers and anybody who wants to read my books to do libraries, or, you know, buy from Linda, buy from an independent bookstore, or buy online, or buy from our websites. We have them for sale on our websites too. So that's important. And I would like to say, I love my readers. A lot of my readers have become good friends. I maybe haven't met them personally, but we send cards, you know, we chat. I can't say enough good about people who read books, and how supportive readers have been during this time.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I would absolutely echo that. Libraries are terrific places, and I will be really happy when ours reopens. And, you know, and as far as does it cut into your book sales, you know, I don't know. If you get our book sale, our library is part of Overdrive. Overdrive is an
Yes.
app that you get on your phone or your tablet, wherever you like your books, and you can get ebooks that way from your library. You can check them out, or you can get audiobooks again and check them out from your library. I get paid as an author whenever anybody checks out one of my books that way, which I appreciate enormously. If a
Yes.
library happens to buy my books for the library, I get paid for that sale. So, you know, I think that it's a wonderful way to really get started on an author, take a chance on an author that maybe you hadn't tried before. I do have a lot of people that really like the feel of a book in their hands, and so
Yes.
the library's great for that. Some people can't afford to feed their book habit. They'll buy some books, but they won't buy every book that they read, because then they would be going broke. And I'm so that way. One of the nice things about being a bookstore is that publishers all the time send me, well, like this one. This is an advanced reader copy. So the book hasn't come out yet, but they send them to bookstores so that I can read them. That's, you know, I can then curate my selection.
Right.
I can decide whether I want to carry the book. And so I have my to read pile since I became a bookstore, huge now. So
I don't even own a bookstore, and I have a
huge. Yeah. So, and you would think everybody's locked at home, everybody would be reading, and that's fantastic. I really haven't had a chance because I've been working, but it's been a good time for books overall. This people have reattached themselves to the joys of sitting and reading with their kids, and just being with their families in general, and books are a part of that, I think.
You know, I was thinking as I was reading a book this morning, you know, I'd read and then I get up and do something and I'd read, and I thought, what is my problem that I just can't sit here for an extended length of time like I used to and just lay back and read? And I decided it was because I've become one of these other people that we're switching so much on our phones and doing things that we have lost the ability to sit for a long time and focus.
Mm-hmm.
Like on reading. So that's something I would definitely recommend to people, that if you have a hard time focusing for a long time on a book, it's not necessarily because the book is boring. It has to do with the habits we've all picked up with social media, and the fact that we need
and all
to
the noise in our lives. There's so much noise in our lives. I had a dad come in probably around Christmas time to buy some books for his kids. And he told me that what they do to really get their kids excited about reading is they set aside time every single day. They turn everything off, and the whole family just sits down with a book and reads. Sometimes they read with the kids. Sometimes everybody's got their own individual books, but every single day they set aside time to read. And I think that's fabulous. I think when parents read, and when parents read and encourage their children to read, that's how you get your children to get excited about books.
I've always been a reader, and my mom always encouraged me to read, and my kids are all readers too, but I encouraged them to read, I bought books for them. They belonged to book clubs, and sometimes they didn't always want to do it. But the books were there if they wanted to pick them up. And now, as adults, they're avid readers. So
And I'm kind of on the fence about this practice of having kids read for school 20 minutes a day or something like that and keeping a reading logbook. Well, I had a mom tell me that her son liked to read until he had to do that for school. And then suddenly it becomes an assignment and it becomes forced reading and stuff like that. And so she tries to just have him read, and then she'll document it in the log, but they don't set aside a specific 20 minutes to read for school, because for him it reacted badly. So I think you have to know your kids, and you have to know what excites them. Get them books on topics they're already excited about, and then they will start picking out books that they like. Kids come into the store all the time and pick out books for themselves, and I just think that's great.
Well, and I understand that, because there for a while, all I was doing was reading books for other authors that needed reviews or wanted reviews, or I was beta reading for them, and I enjoyed it, except I wasn't reading. That was all I was reading. And I was missing all my crime thrillers and some of the other books, some of the new books that came out that I really wanted to read, but I didn't have time to read. So now I found a happy medium for that.
Yeah. I remember when I finished grad school, I never wanted to read another book in my life because I was so sick of reading from grad school. And it probably took me 5 years before I picked up a book. And now, instead of the really heavy stuff, I read light and fun books. So maybe I've never recovered from grad school. I'm not sure.
That's not a bad thing.
What comes next for you, Julie? What do you have on the docket?
I am writing a book that's totally different, and I'm actually in the middle of it. I've been writing it for 5 years, but I'm now going to actually finish it. I'm writing a book called The Joy Killer, and it's about a woman in her 60s that takes a look at her life, has a husband that isn't always kind to her, and discovers that she doesn't know what joy is anymore. And so she takes off in the middle of the night and finds herself a place to just be, meets some unusual people, and takes time to figure out what things mean in her life and where she goes next. I have no idea what's going to happen with the end. And I'm like that with a lot of my writing. I'm a pantser. I just start writing. And then
For those of you who are not writers, a pantser means you just write and the story comes out, and a planner plans the story out so you know exactly where you're going, and then you just flesh it out as you go.
Yeah, and I can't plan. I tried that when I first started writing, and I realized that's what everybody else was doing after I got published. And it totally destroyed my creativity. So I have that. I'm working on a book on Granny. I'm working on a brilliant Minnesota book, and I have to get started on the second book in my Whistle Stop series because I have people asking for it too.
Nice.
Yeah, so I need to get going on that. So I'm just going to do a lot of writing. I really want to actually do some Zoom interviews with authors and artists, and I actually would like to do some Zoom interviews with some of my readers. I'd like to get together and have some reader chats too. So, but I'm one of these people that my brain never quits. And so I have all these things I want to do, and then I wear myself out. And so I'm trying to take it slow. Like writing for me, there are some people that just churn out books. And that's not who I am. Number one, I want a quality book. Number two, I'm not writing just to write. I'm writing because, and I think you're seeing more of that as my writing gets better, sharing more heart, more who people actually are inside, and turning them into my characters. I want people to come away feeling like they're a part of that family of characters. And that takes time.
It does. Now, do you ever have a character that you have a plan for this character? I know you're not a planner, but you have in mind what you want this character to do, and the character flat out refuses to do it?
Yeah, you know, Granny's like that. Granny's like
She
that.
would be.
You know, I was writing a scene, and I don't even remember which book it was, and she was getting up. They were awarding her the key to the city, and she got up to take the key and stop, and I was just writing along. All of a sudden, she flopped down and dead fainting right on stage, and I had to quit.
And you're like, why are you doing that? Yes.
I didn't know. I didn't know.
I have had characters do that, yes.
And then sometimes, if you're not comfortable really with a character, you don't feel like that character is really who they are, so you have to change them a little bit. And I found in Brilliant, when I was writing Jezebel, I was having a real hard time at first because I was turning her into Granny. And though she's silly and has a quirky sense of humor, she is so not Granny. In fact, her and Granny, Fushcia and Brilliant, are 20 miles apart, so they know each other.
Oh, how funny.
But they don't like each other. They don't like each other. And so
now, do you do any
Alan
crossover?
Espins,
do you introduce?
well, I'm going, that's been in my plans. In fact, William Kent Kruger, I think he's the one that told me that. When we had dinner one time a long time ago, I think he said, well, maybe it was Alan that said, maybe you should put the two characters together. And so I am thinking they may go on a camping trip to northern Minnesota. You know, I'm just really, we've had some personal things during the past year with my husband's health, his short-term memory. He's having a little issue with it. And so that has stopped some of my writing, but I think I'm motivated now. I just feel like all I want to do is write.
Awesome. Well, then I won't hold you back. It's
yes,
been
you can visit my blog.
Meeting you. Julie and I have been friends on Facebook, I don't know, forever, you know. And so this is our first kind of virtual face-to-face meeting. So it's really lovely because Kansas is a little bit far from Minnesota, although not as far as Wyoming was when I was living in Wyoming. So maybe I'm just
that's right. But you had some interesting Wyoming stories, I thought. I actually have relatives in Wyoming that I'd love to go visit sometime. So,
well, I have an author friend who keeps posting the turkeys.
Montana
is very similar. Yeah. So I have an author friend who keeps posting the pictures of the flock of turkeys that are hanging out in this neighborhood downtown. So they used to hang out over by Walmart, but you know, then they kind of disappeared because there's a lot of traffic. So now they've appeared in this residential neighborhood downtown. So sometimes you get a flock of turkeys, sometimes there's a herd of deer. That's downtown Casper for you.
Yeah.
Now here,
that would be fun. I love turkeys in my yard. And people can find me if they want on julieseedorf.com.
Yes, thank you for reminding me that. I will post that with the video. The video will post on my Facebook page. It'll post on our YouTube page. So you will be able to learn more about Julie. You'll be able to save it, to share it with other people, and to find all of her books either here at the store, or if you go to my store on Facebook, Russell Specialty Books and Gifts, you'll see the link to my online store if you prefer ebooks or audiobooks. So thank you, Julie. I appreciate you coming.
Wait. I want to hear that skunk story.
Oh, we have skunks in town, and now we don't have any in our yard because we have dogs in our yard, but we had this mama skunk looking for a place to have her babies, and she kept tunneling under our front deck. So we kept stomping on the deck to scare her away, and then, you know, stopping up the places that she was digging under to get in. So I don't think she made it to have her babies down there, but it was hit or miss there for a while. You don't want a mama skunk having babies under your porch.
You're lucky, because when we got married, a skunk sprayed.
Oh, you locked up there on us for a minute.
When we got married, a skunk sprayed the farm. Okay, when we got married, a skunk sprayed the farm where my husband lived, and all his clothes on our honeymoon smelled like skunk.
Oh no!
We had to air out the
remedies for that, but I don't know that you ever really get rid of it. Well, Wow. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate you coming, Julie. I appreciate you guys for listening, and please tune in. We will have more of these author events no matter what the lockdown does to us. Thanks for coming. Thanks, Julie.
Thanks, Linda.
Bye,
Bye.
everybody.